So while it's great to be up here on stage, I have no penchant to be up here all day. So I'm going to be passing on the baton to someone who is a real pro at this. Our MC for the day, Shannon Reed, did this, I think, 2 years ago. I can't wait to see her in action because everything that I've heard is she is really magnificent in getting us through the day. So Shannon was recently named President and Chief Client Officer at Publicis Group. And in her previous role as President of Wavemaker's U.S. L'Oreal business, she oversaw the strategic direction of the partnership between MEC and L'Oreal and ensured that L'Oreal USA remained on the cutting edge of media innovation. Being a pioneer herself, she opened her own agency in 2001 named Morphus Media and built it into a highly profitable and well-respected digital media business known for its work within the luxury fashion and retail client set, as well as media and entertainment, where she had clients like New York Times, A&E Networks, and Vimeo. So, without further ado, I give you Miss Shannon Reed.
Good morning, everyone. How's everybody feeling? Good? You're all excited and energized after Scott, I'm sure. I know I am. I know I wrote down question everything and be brave. Those were my two, wow, there isn't better advice than that, is there? For everything that we do, because it is all constantly shifting. So my career in media and in advertising actually started long before I got into owning Morpheus Media, et cetera. I actually started on the data side of things with a small company called Spectra. Does anybody know Spectra? Right, now part of Nielsen. It was before it was part of Nielsen, doing CPG analytics as an analyst, as a junior analyst. It was so much fun, and I was on the project that brought you Heineken Light, probably 10 years after I started working on it. It's how long it took to bring that product to market, but we ultimately brought you Heineken Light, so you're welcome. That was my goal. Today is going to be a really exciting day. We have with us some fantastic speakers, as you can see from the brochures that you have in front of you and the agenda, so you don't need me telling you about what a great show we have for you today. With that, I'm actually going to flip straight forward to bringing up this amazing next panel. This panel is about smart data and smart strategies. It's moderated by Kelly Liyakasa. Kelly, did I get that right? I'm so excited. That's okay. My next introduction is going to be even harder, so we'll work on that. Yanni, wherever you are, come see me later. I'm going to have to work on that last name. That'll be fun. So Kelly is going to moderate a panel for us. Kelly was the senior editor of AdExchanger. She covers commerce, video, TV, and marketing tech. Prior to AdExchanger, she was an associate editor for Information Today, where she reported on enterprise technology and strategy for CRM Magazine. In other words, she not only knows data, but also probably hears from every single one of our PR people on a regular basis about the data stories that we want to tell. With that, please welcome Kelly and her illustrious panel.
Good morning, everyone. Excuse us, we haven't had our coffee yet. Looks like Whitney has. Great. Well, I'm Kelly Liyakasa. As said in the intro, I'm a senior editor for AdExchanger, where I cover a multitude of topics, all of which have data underlying them. So I'm super excited to be here again for the second year. Thank you to the 4As for having me. And today we're going to be talking about smart data and smart strategies, especially in the agency land. And as you all know, data is dissected very differently amongst different agency groups. And every agency has a different way of activating data, whether that's in the form of media, creative, or CRM. I wanted to talk to all of our panelists today about how they're thinking about data within their respective organizations, because data is definitely not a one-size-fits-all. So I thought we'd go down the line and introduce each of our panelists to hear who they are and where they work and what they do. And we'll start with Sharona.
Hi, Sharona Sankar King. I head up the marketing science discipline within BBDO. And you want me to answer the question about how we use data differently?
That'd be great.
So if you think about how, I'm going to put it in context of media, because we work very closely with our media agencies, whether it's our sister agencies or outside. And what media agencies are really very good at, and we're using the same data with a different lens of answering the question of, where do we find people? How do we actually approach them in the different moments and spaces in which they, around their journey, and so, to build up that reach and scale, right? In creative, we're really trying to answer the question of why. Why? What motivates people? Why does it matter what I say to them as a brand? Why are they going to listen to me? Why do they do the things they do? What are the underlying needs? So if you look at kind of like that hierarchy of needs, we actually use that a lot by looking at that through the lens of the data. So that's really what we do. We're getting down to the motivations, the needs, and the underlying human truths that drive action.
Thank you, Sharona. And up next, we have Andy.
Sure. Hi, everyone. My name is Andy Fisher. I'm the Chief Analytics Officer at Merkle. We were just acquired by Dentsu, and so we're part of the Dentsu family now. Our legacy is CRM, so we've been in the CRM business for about 25 years. As part of the CRM business, we act as a data reseller. So we ingest all the different third-party data sources out there. We put them all together, we clean them up against each other, and we resell that with the analytics on top of that. And so, for example, if you've got a piece of mail offering you a new insurance offer for your car, we probably help send that. Recently, we've gotten in the last couple of years, we've gotten really into the digital agency business, and we're committed to bringing the people-based, one-to-one, data-driven approach that has been very powerful in CRM to the world of digital, and really trying to clean up this space and build a cookie-free data, a clean cookie-free data way of targeting and optimization.
Great, and we have Whitney.
Hi, I'm Whitney Jones. I'm with Digitas LBI. I lead the data and analysis team for New York and Atlanta. I'm also part of the Publicis Spine, which is a group of about 3,500 data scientists, data engineers, analysts across Publicis Group who are working together to help create scale and best practices for our clients. So the way that we approach data differently, I think, is pretty simple. We look at data strategies as a people strategy, really. And we have two goals. One is to help our clients get to a single ID that helps them activate and understand who their customers are. And we're in the business. We're in a hearts and minds business in advertising. And what we really want to do is help our clients use data not to create a media plan or create a piece of creative. It's about understanding what we need the customer to do and deliver the experience that's going to yield it.
Excellent. Hi, everyone. My name is Michael Kaushansky, and I hold two positions at Havas. So I'm the Chief Data Officer. I oversee the data practice for North America, and I also oversee the CRM practice. And so kind of the way we operate within Havas, there are kind of three realities or three ways that we think about data. First is that all data is marketing data, right? So historically, media agencies have owned a lot of the ad server data, a lot of the GRP data. And we know that media data can and maybe influences an individual to take an action, but there's way more data that's available for that. So all data should be marketing data, and there's other data sources that inform our practice. The second is our view that data is always on, right? We heard about that. We heard more about that from Scott, in the fact that even today there are signals that are being spewed from our cell phones. Whether we're collecting them or not is up to us, but data is always on, so we should be listening. And the third kind of reality, both around technology and data, is this notion of the rise of the marketing engineer. And this is the combination of, both on the advertiser side and also on the agency side, of the combination of somebody that thinks about marketing and advertising, but also has this appreciation of data and tech. And so those people are kind of unicorns, and they're difficult to hire. But if you can build a culture and train the individuals within the organization to think like data engineers, then you can solve for more of the data challenges that you have upstream. So those three things kind of start to guide the way we form, and we're bridging that first-party data and media data together in a privacy-safe way, thus overseeing the CRM practice and also the media advertising practice. It starts to make sense.
What I like about each of you is that you focus in on a very unique part of the customer supply chain, whether that's media and CRM or creative or database. And was really curious, who owns data analytics and management within your agency group? Is it centralized or more dispersed? And I'll throw that first to Andy.
Oh, wow. Yeah, that's a complicated question because we have a really scaled data and analytics offering. We have about 1,500 engineers. We have about 800 statisticians. And this is something that we sell this as a product, right? It's actually bigger than our media business. And so, we compete with the Accentures and the Fractals and the Mu Sigmas of the world in that space. So it is what we are, right? So there's not necessarily one group that owns it, or it's core to our business and core to who we are. So.
Yeah. And Whitney, you mentioned Publicis Spine, which emerged, I believe, in October. I might be killing that. But take us through that and really how its sister agencies really leverage that division within Publicis.
Yeah, so I think it's partially, or it's less about owning the data and analytics, and it's more about pulling people together around a couple of core tenets that help us scale the way we operate into our agency brands and across our clients. So the real goal with the Spine is to create a single set of tools that our folks are expert at using, and really train people to be able to ask the right questions and find the right answers to help drive the business forward. So the Spine is able to provide a platform that all of the brands and our clients can really take advantage of.
Sure. And Sharona, take us through the development of your division, which last year I believe was new, applying marketing science to creative at BBDO.
Yeah, so what's great about Omnicom is we've built an agile data platform some time ago, and it's coming into its own. It's very mature at this point. And so a lot of the data sources that we have been layered on with a lot of thought and a lot of careful attention to how the different various agencies utilize that data. So it was very use case based. It wasn't like we're just going to throw all this data into a bunch of data lakes and figure it out later. It really was, what are we going to build for media? What are we going to build for creative? What are we actually still do CRM and everything like that across Omnicom? What are those different use cases, and what are those data sources and pieces that we need to piece together to be able to make that the right set of tools and the right level of data, because it's the granularity as well that gets us to the right answer. And in some cases, it's centralized, but yet each agency builds their own solutions. And I sit on an XLT on that centralized committee to build the use cases and services that either our end clients can use and access, or that we access. So it's very modular. We're a very open source culture, where I think out of anywhere that I've ever worked, I think that at Omnicom, it's everybody puts into the pot, and everybody has access to what comes out.
Sure. And Michael, curious if you would say Havas has a similar strategy. Do you have an open source culture, and where does Helia fit into the larger organization?
So maybe two things, and I'll talk about Helia. So again, back to my notion of the rise of the marketing engineer, you have to make data ubiquitously available, right? So we have a federated data model that ensures that everyone is versed in the data sets that we have and the insights that we're delivering, so you can deliver value to the clients. At the same time, to the point that was just made earlier around tools, there is a hub and spoke approach, so the tools are centralized. The second point might be a little bit controversial, but let me speak a little more about that, is I heard the three of you talk about building internal platforms. And kind of the way we think about data is, as an agent, an agency is an agent, that we don't really take a principal position on any sort of technology, right? And we source best of breed, right? Because our P&L, and I would argue any agency's P&L, doesn't support the sort of VC funding to develop a top-notch platform like an Adobe or an Oracle, or if you don't like those, maybe a Neustar, so on and so forth. So partnering with a best of breed allows that sort of data ownership to be shared between that agency and the advertiser. If you go all in with an agency that has its own platform, what if you leave that agency? Where does that data go, right? So our approach is agnostic in terms of technology. On the Helia side, of course, it's a CRM platform. So with that, the data has to reside in some sort of a repository. So whether we enable that to sit on the client side or we host that data in a privacy-secure private cloud, we offer both of those services. But it is important to kind of note the fact that as an agency, do you want to take the principal position with GDPR coming in terms of owning that cookie-level ID data? Or do you want that liability to be owned by the third parties and provide a service as an agent to the advertiser? So anyway, so that's my approach.
Andy, I'm curious about your reaction to that.
Yeah, so a couple things. So first of all, I think that the word principle is being thrown around in some ways that are not actually technically accurate, because principle means that you're about how money is being exchanged. However, a lot of times our platforms are just about how data is exchanged. And you need a layer of automation to do that, right? And we're happy to use we use every single platform there is. I mean, my goodness, we implemented Adobe on Adobe. Right, so
How's that possible?
I did have a big presence at Summit. I can verify.
There you go. So we have to be very, very careful with that particular word. But we build platforms where the industry hasn't built those platforms, and there's a need for it. And where the industry has built those platforms, we leverage those industry-built platforms. And so, you build where there's a need, and you use external stuff. And so that's the first thing that I would react to there. The second thing is, we're built on a core of PII. Right? So all this data that we're talking about at Merkle, it's all PII because it's all connected to CRM data, and all CRM data is PII. So yeah, you have to be super careful with the new regulatory environments that are coming out in Europe. But we are, and that's part of the business. I mean, if you go to last night when you go and you check into your hotel room, you kind of need some PII to make that work, and you kind of need it to be right. Yeah. And so.
I just would argue agency might not be the right moderator or manager of that sort of transaction.
Yeah, but and that's an excellent point. But the CRM companies out there, such as ourselves, such as other great CRM companies out there, I'll name some of them by name: Axiom, Epsilon, Experian. They are. They do build that, and we build that for our clients. So, we're in a weird spot because we came from the CRM business and we built an agency. We're not an agency that's trying to get into first party and CRM. I think it's a little easier to go our direction, but that's a very self-serving opinion.
I want to say ditto. Even though I sit within an agency, and the reason it's called an agile data platform is that it's all partner agnostic, and we plug and play different partners and license our data. So as Scott said earlier, we all tap into the same data source. We rent it. We don't. What we do though is we piece it together and really do look across to ensure the quality of that data across for the different use cases we have for the different agencies. So I think it's not necessarily, and we have not as many as Merkle, of course, but we have a good robust team, about 1,200 data scientists and data engineers coming from all walks of life. And we've built a pretty good mousetrap as far as being able to have it perform in market. We still have those issues that Scott was talking about, right, that we still have to solve.
So I think to build on that too, as an agent and sitting where we are, I think your notion around best of breed is of course incredibly important, but a lot of clients are also coming to us to kind of help jumpstart what they're doing and to help us kind of bring to them a curated or a point of view on a solution that can help them get ahead more quickly. Publicis Group has taken a very non-PII anonymous ID approach to the Publicis ID. But where we've really been able to help our clients is to gain scale quickly because we have built out a Publicis ID that can help them kind of jumpstart where they're going.
Yeah, we're not housing the PII data, but we're working with Axiom as one of our partners, Experian's one of our partners. We're actually agnostic, so Epsilon could be a partner tomorrow. And we're actually stitching together, so we have something called the Agile ID that is stitched together across all of our data sources using that PII as the bedrock. So we're not going with one provider of PII, we're actually going with multiple. We anonymize that once we get it because we can't have that housed in the media side of the business and everything. But that's how we're approaching it. And again, we can plug and play. If Dentsu and Merkle weren't all one, we'd be probably doing it with you too.
Yeah, and we have shared clients.
Yeah.
So you are.
Yeah, yeah, we are. Yeah, for the clients that we share, we are.
Yeah, I mean, the majority of our clients aren't media clients.
Yeah.
So
yeah.
there's many ones that are shared across
Yeah.
people
Yeah.
in this panel.
And what's interesting to me is that each of you seem to be developing almost a proprietary ID, some that scale across. But thinking about Merkle and M1, Publicis and People Cloud, I believe you call it, I think one of the byproducts of that initiative is really identity resolution and how that can really improve personalization. So curious, how far along you guys are in really building that unique identifier.
Yeah. So I can jump in. So our approach has really been global. So we're pretty far along. We have about 460 million IDs globally, and I think we sort of think about growth of the ID on two levels, like you said. One is the number of IDs and scale, and the other is the ability to append additional information to those IDs, and that is where we come into a couple of things, right? So one being open source and easy to connect and choosing platforms and partners that make that possible. And then the other piece is working with our clients to figure out who are the right second-party data relationships and having an ID that is synergistic with our media partners or our customers, vendors, and different folks in their ecosystem that can help them take what is a single profile and make it much more robust for the purposes of personalization or modeling or whatever kind of marketing activity they're after.
Sure. Michael?
So what I was going to say is, who owns identity? That's kind of a critical question, right? So if the agency develops an ID, right, and they kind of sell that through to the advertiser onboards that ID, is that now the advertiser's ID, or is that the agency ID, or is there now a co-op that you can share? How does that work? Like that's my question, because again, our POV is that it's absolutely positively the advertiser's data. These are their customers, their ID, and what we're doing is we're facilitating the marketing, right, of that ID, and we're facilitating the communication to their customers and getting them to engage with the brand. Now, if that model is slightly different, if we do as an agency need to develop an ID, so I need to be convinced of that. So that's where I'm struggling a little bit.
Let's take a step back. The reason we need an ID in the first place, right, is to stitch together an individual and be able to understand from one data source to another that's the same individual, right?
Correct.
So as a creative agency, I need to understand that somebody of a particular profile with my third-party data is also going to these various different places and spaces online and their websites, right? And then after they go to those different websites, they're consuming certain types of videos that tell me more about their motivations and needs. And then they're going, because we've stitched together location-based data with online data and social data. So now I know what they're talking about, right, in the social sphere, what's important to them. And then I can track them to walking into the store or not. All those things help me be better at building great, motivating, engaging, creative that's going to move our client's business. So that ID, even though it's our proprietary ID, it's the use case is sitting within we're doing what our clients are asking us to do. So that's the reason why we have the proprietary ID. We also have a match to, because we use Newstar and Experian, all those kind of things. We have match logic that allows our clients to also tap into and rebuild an ID that works for them on their side. So it's very easy to onboard a client or to go the other way around. So it's kind of not, our use case is very specific to the reason why we have it.
This is
I was going to say, I think the approach we take is similar, and it's pretty simple in that, we have an ID we've developed in order to help our clients get scale quickly. As soon as you bring together client data and the Publicis ID, it becomes the client ID, and the client owns their data. So it is portable in that respect, and really what we're doing is bringing to the table scale plus precision, or what the client knows about their customer.
So this is a very interesting place, because this is the area where CRM and traditional agencies are just colliding, right? And it's interesting to see this from the CRM side, because people talk about these IDs and these approaches as if it's a new thing. But it's not, right?
It's been around forever.
Yeah, it's been.
I started in CRM, so
yeah,
that's why I have to
exactly.
respect for it.
So there's an entire field called MRM, or Master Record Management, devoted to how companies maintain their ID infrastructure. And we play in that space. Our product's called Connected Recognition. There's other vendors in that space too, none of which are agencies. But there are other vendors in that space, and we build the services that allow a marketer or a company, any company, to come in and take all their data and put all the pieces together and organize all the shards and connect it all together. And that's something that's been going on for 25 years and been very formalized. Now, when we create the Merkle ID for this third-party data, all we're doing is we're taking our connected recognition product, a whole bunch of third-party data sources, and running our product on ourselves, right? And so and these products, they compete against each other. I've pitched for identity management products. And you talk about customization and standardization and all this good stuff. But it's not a matter of just saying, okay, I'm going to create an ID and you have to use it. It's an entire field where there's a whole service layer around being able to create IDs and customize IDs in any way you want. And like I say, the next time you check in on an airline, or you check in on a hotel, or you look at your credit card statement, you're actively using those services.
I think it's a great point. I think, Michael, you bring up a really important point around data jurisdiction and who really owns or should be able to manage and facilitate that data. I know a lot of what we talked about was client data, but I'm really curious about third-party data and second-party data and how you guys are vetting your data sources. How do you maintain proper data hygiene and ensure you have the right kind of data? Maybe we start with Michael.
Sure. Kind of three ways that we look at kind of data quality, if you will. I mean, I think that's the question. The first is the availability and the frequency of that data. How often is it available, and can we refresh, right? Is it fresh enough for us to do anything about it, right? So it's almost the frequency. The second piece is around the completeness of it, right? So how complete is it? So we spoke about, there was a mention of, well, I know somebody is transacting on online video, but I don't have that connected to their social profile or their mobile profile, so the data is incomplete. So you're going to make incomplete decisions, not as accurate, so is the data complete? And that's one use case, but there's multiple use cases on complete data. And then the third, so that's kind of data quality. And the last piece is still falls within data quality, I think, but it's around actionability, right? So if the data is frequent enough and I know a lot about this consumer, is it portable? Can I do something with it, right? And if I can do something with it, is it only within a single channel? Is it only within Facebook? Or is it only within YouTube? Or can I actually port it out across the ecosystem, right? So I think if you follow these three rules, at least internally, the way we look at it, then that data becomes more of a quality data set that you can actually apply to multiple use cases across marketing and stuff like that.
Yeah, and Sharona, you had mentioned a few offline data sources in your work with third parties such as Axiom and Experience. So curious how you're thinking about the offline component.
Yeah, we have data partners for the offline data because it's really important, especially when you're working with. We work with a lot of retailers, and we also port in CPG data too, and there's all kinds of stuff because we don't just do ads. We also do creative for packaging and things like that. So we need to get things down to the barcode of what people are actually buying. I think one of the things that I would add to your list is representativeness. So when we're looking at data quality, when we actually look at the different data points by individual, how representative is it to what's actually happening? And there's ways to check that. And then, so you need to identify really where the biases are and either adjust for that with some kind of weighting up or weighting down, or you need to say, hey, it's not complete enough, it's not going to be something that I can use. Save it for later and hope that you're able to account for that when the data actually does become more complete. So that's really how we approach it. We're always looking for where the biases are in the data.
Sure, and numerous industry bodies have talked about an idea of a data labeling initiative, and really curious if, as an industry, we should do more to quantify and qualify the value of data. And Andy, I think you've said that's easy to say, but another story in actually doing it. So can you standardize quality?
I think it's hard to standardize quality, but it's certainly easy to standardize provenance. Yes. And that would be an excellent first start. A little bit about data. We fundamentally believe that, known at individual level high-quality third-party data that has been ingested, connected to other sources, multi-source, checked against each other. And it is the standard. It is the gold standard. There's some higher gold standards with things like TU and Experian and the bureau data, but other than that, like this is the standard. And once again, it's a very developed area in the CRM world where there's a set of products that people have to help clients go and figure out which data sets should they use, how should they ingest it, how should they clean it up, what's the value to their database, right? And it wouldn't even be something necessarily we own, right? We have a lot of clients where they use our identity management and our data ingestion techniques to build their internal databases, right? And we never touch it or see it. So it's a very standardized area. But the point I'm making is that it's that known first-party data that's really good. And in digital, so much of the data that you see is not known first-party. It's this cookie-level data that you see on exchanges. And I'm going to be a little bit inflammatory. A lot of it's really bad. So I'll give you an example. It's going to get more inflammatory. Let me talk about me for a second. Who am I? Who am I? I'm from Dallas. I live in Dallas right now. I have 3 children. I'm married. My family income is $135,000. I speak Russian. I don't know if you knew that. I own 3 motorcycles. I'm interested in luxury automobiles. None of these things are true. But when I checked this morning, that's what the exchanges said about my cookie.
Yeah.
None of that is true. That's all completely false. What's going on is the business model makes it so that bad data makes money. And that's the problem we have to solve. And the CRM side of that's been largely solved because bad data means you have terrible CRM programs. But in the digital side of the business, we're still trying to figure that out.
Michael, do we need data labels?
Well, just to give Andy a plug, because I do agree with him that going upstream is much easier. So starting from a CRM base is much easier to kind of connect to digital. And by the way, most advertisers, if they look at their revenue, most of that revenue is recurring, meaning that it is existing customers coming back. So if you can capture that data and you can remarket, not retarget, remarket to the existing base of known users in a highly kind of accurate, quality forward way, then absolutely that's the better way to go. And then if you can take that data and again in a privacy forward and accurate way, connect it to digital media, maybe using cookies, maybe using other devices, that is by far, in my opinion, the most accurate way to go to market, right? The top-down approach, I don't think is accurate to your point. I think the top-down approach has many errors. Apple's coming out with all sorts of provisions where you can't retarget and you can't remarket. All these browsers eventually will start to configure and protect your data. So I do think that this kind of come back to relationship marketing or the come back to CRM is a big focus for a lot of the smarter advertisers. Your question was around data labeling?
Yep, the data labeling initiative we've been hearing about from some agencies. Do you think we need more explanation around data quality and variance?
Labeling, so say like maybe a co-op? I'm not following exactly.
Yeah,
I think, I think the labeling question is a little difficult, mainly because you could get, so what I would like is a label that tells me the source of the data, how it was generated, how much of it's probabilistic, how much of it's deterministic, so that I have a gauge kind of around the quality of the data. But once you take that data point and you start stitching together with the other data sources with your ID or whatever it is that you're using to stitch the data together, then you have to almost kind of create another data label for yourself and how you're using that data, because that quality of that same data point coming in now looks different when I stitch it together with all these other data sources, right? So how complete it is, how representative, all that stuff. So I think a label, I don't know if that's really the right way to say it, but give us the sourcing, give us how much of it, give us a gauge. And then once we ingest it, we know what to do with it in order to how to use it most effectively.
So a related notion, but kind of looking ahead, is I think around the idea of data sovereignty. And what I'm really interested to see is how things like blockchain technology will allow consumers to become much more owners of their own identities. at their kind of endpoint devices. And so a lot of the issues that we're talking about are due to the fact that so many assumptions are layered, assumption upon assumption upon assumption upon assumption is layered on a data point, and we're like expecting it to be real, which is kind of, it's not really realistic.
Yep.
And so what I think will be really interesting is as consumers become much more the shepherds of how they are, how they're creating their own identities out into the marketing ecosystem, how will advertisers be able to take advantage of that differently, but also how much more accurate will that make our ability to really go after the people that we want.
Yeah, and if you look at the people who have really, really accurate consumer data out there, it's people like Facebook. It's people where consumers have voluntarily given their data, and that's a great example of these use cases where, the advertiser has PII, prospect lists, value for each prospect, Facebook or other publishers. They know who's there, and the two are connected, and never a cookie is harmed. The thing you have to be careful about, though, too, is in these labeling initiatives, how hard it is, right? And so let's just take an example where you're talking about PII for known data. So you have a data set, 300 million rows, 16,000 variables. A lot of the variables are derived. And by the way, this is smaller than the cookie data sets, right? And so all those are derived. Well, this variable for this particular person came from these 4 sources and then was modeled out this way with a lookalike model on these sources. And so you're literally talking about hundreds of billions of labels. So it's not an easy thing to just say, okay, well, this is a good data set and this is a bad data set. Like, this is going to be a really hard initiative, totally worthwhile. And I think it's a great idea. But let's not delude ourselves about how tricky this is.
That's why I think it's more important than labeling is to source the data and how it was built and have almost like metadata that goes with whatever data you're ingesting.
Classification of the data.
That tells you a little bit more about the quality of it rather than a label.
Yeah, the CRM.
There is no good or bad. Yeah, it's how you're using it.
So one point, just again, an alternative thought, is that I think the management of data provides a competitive advantage to some advertisers. If we standardize all of the data and it becomes, again, ubiquitous with an ID and it's super accurate, like the credit bureau as an example, everybody's using the most accurate data set, so what's the competitive advantage? What's the lowest rate? What's the lowest APR, right? So who can go, it's a race to the bottom at that point. But if you have a unique data set, if you're using it in a unique way and you sourced it in a unique way, then maybe for that campaign you can go to market in a unique way. So that just to throw that out there, because I know there's a push for standardization, but at the same time there is this resistance to kind of conform and do what everybody else is doing.
I think the holy grail would be if we all did have the same data across all the data sources. I don't want to hoard there's no special data that I want. We have a lot of data sources. I'm an open source minded person, sorry. There's a lot of data that's out there that we're all using today, right? We're all making these different IDs and stuff like that. But if we all had the same ID, I look at it differently. The quality of the people that I hire, I don't hire just data scientists. I hire neuroscientists, PhDs in psychology, people who really understand how people work, how they think, what's in their gut, what's the human truth, what's the need, what's the motivation. We have a certain lens that we're putting onto the data that is proprietary. Our process to getting to that answer is proprietary. I would give you all the data that we have, and I bet you this team will still come up with incredible insights that help us drive better creative.
And I think it opens up an important question, which is when to use third-party data available in a data marketplace and more regularly available, or when to craft something custom, which I think is a big debate right now. Did want to get to a question around clients and first-party data, because I think sentiment is changing among marketers, and really curious how your clients have embraced first-party data and how their requests for you as their partner are changing. Maybe we start with Whitney.
Yeah, so most of the clients we work with, I think, look at first-party data as sort of the top of the food chain in terms of how valuable an actual data asset is. It's highest resolution, typically. You know the most about these people. I think where we've seen some really interesting questions is with brands who are sort of disintermediated from their customers. So brands who don't sell directly and don't necessarily have a great mechanism to collect a ton of first-party data because it's not the relationship they've traditionally had with their customers. And so the question then becomes, how do I leverage either second-party relationships or new value-added services in order to create an incentive or create a mechanism to basically generate a proxy first-party data set. And that's, I think, where we're getting into some really interesting questions around how do you solve this for clients. And it's a great balance of creativity and the human aspect of advertising with also the data science bit.
Yeah, we have a very specific way of looking at it. We always start with current consumer. Always. We never don't. And the reason we do that is we really need to understand who's really with the brand today. What happens when you stay within just the CRM data or just the first-party data? It is the most valuable because you do get reoccurring revenue. But that doesn't always, that helps to keep the lights on. That does not always drive growth. So what we look for is that next tier, which I call it adjacent audiences. And those adjacent audiences are where you're going to expand, where your brand can play. And you can find new audiences to bring within, within the fold. And then lastly is generating entirely new demand. And entirely new demand really is going to be coming from, so you have category buyers, which will be your adjacent kind of folks. And then you have people who are not quite as easy to get, but they're emerging things that are happening either in culture, like people even eating avocado toast, and other things like that you can, I know, there's so many weird things that we look at to understand people. But there's things like, let's take beauty, for instance. There's this whole new movement to natural beauty or to emphasizing the things that make you who you are that's truly about you. So for instance, people are now making their freckles more prominent or, not instead of covering them up. Those are what make me, right? So there's a lot of different trends and things that we can now take that trend that's happening in culture that we see at a macro level and then go to this more micro level of the identity data. Find those people who are the ones that are really the au naturals in beauty versus the people who want to paint their faces, because we still have those. We have people who want to augment themselves at like 20 years old and they're getting Botox at 21. So you've got these very different audiences. Which one does your brand align with? Where do you have the authentic permission to provide this consumer with a message that they're going to actually be able to receive?
Yeah, and segmentation's become an art and a science.
Yeah.
And I think we have time for one more question. I'm going to throw that to Andy to close us out. And really, where are the biggest gaps you see at the client level? What would you put on your wish list?
Yeah, that's a great question because, we believe that first-party data is the magic, right? It's the thing that powers everything. And if you're a banker and you're an insurance company, you have first-party data about everybody. You know every prospect there. You know what the value is of that prospect to your franchise. You know their likeliness to convert, right? You have all that information. There's sort of two big challenges that come out with this. And one is being able to organize around it, because historically that's lived in the CRM drippy basement where the media people may not have used it and the agency people have not used it. And so putting those two components together, right, can be very, very tricky. It's very tricky from a legal perspective, from an organizational perspective, from a technology perspective. That's very hard. Second of all, and someone mentioned, there's a lot of advertisers out there who are not first-party data rich, right? Like CPG companies, automotive companies, pharma companies, insurance companies, right? And media companies, right? And so as someone has gone from being a net TV network to an OTT offering, as an insurance company starts to sell direct, as someone like a Tesla says, no, I'm not going to have a three-tier dealer system. I'm going to own my own data and be illegal in some countries or in some states because of that. Helping clients figure out how to move from just being a brand demo, build beautiful creative, reach the right demos, do it efficiently, to owning that relationship with the customer. It's really, really hard, and it's a complete mind change for companies. And so it's a big part of the business.
And unfortunately, we are out of time. Thank you so much to our panelists.